There was a time when the edge of the village was not only a place of fear, it was a place of negotiation. The land beyond the last house was not empty. It was alive, growing, watching, changing, and people understood that it could not be mastered, only approached with care. Paths were kept clear, trees were marked, certain places were avoided altogether, not because they were evil, but because they were older. The boundary was not meant to banish the wild. It was meant to hold it at a distance that could be survived, close enough to sustain life, far enough to prevent it from taking too much. And when that balance failed, when attention slipped, when structure weakened, when the old agreements were forgotten, the stories changed. Black Anis does not roam. She does not howl or call out or chase those who wander too close. In the old accounts, she waits, settled into the places where the land folds in on itself. Hollow trees split by age, caves pressed into hillsides, thick hedgerows where daylight thins and sound does not carry. She is described as dark-faced, sometimes blue-black, with iron claws and long arms. Some say she wears the skins of those she takes. Others say she only takes what she needs, leaving the rest behind: a shoe, a coat, bones hidden where no light reaches. But her appearance was never the warning. Her patience was. Black Anis appears where human attention weakens, where children wander ahead, where parents are tired, where shortcuts are taken and warnings are half remembered. She does not force mistakes. She waits for them. Her stories were not told to frighten for pleasure. They were instructions. Do not stray too far. Do not turn your back. Do not assume the land will forgive distraction. In a world where a single misstep could end a life, Black Anis gave that danger a shape. She is nature without mercy, not cruel, not malicious, simply indifferent to human need. And yet, she is only the first warning. Because beyond the places where Black Anis waits lies something more unsettling, the possibility that a person might cross the boundary and not return at all. The werewolf of British folklore is not the creature of full moons and silver bullets. That version came later. In earlier accounts, wolfmen appear quietly, almost reluctantly, in chronicles, sermons, and legal records. They are described not as predators unleashed, but as humans reduced, transformed through curse, sin, exile, or divine judgment. The change is never framed as power. It is framed as loss. To become wolf-like was to lose structure, to lose language, to lose place. In early Britain, survival depended on community, shared food, shared labor, shared protection. To live alone was already a form of death. The wolf represented everything beyond that protection: hunger, exposure, isolation, moral collapse. The wolfman embodied the fear of becoming less than human, not through magic, but through separation. These figures lived at the margins, in forests, on moors, beyond cultivated land. They were grouped with wild men, hermits, and cursed outcasts, those who no longer moved in rhythm with the rest of the world. Even gentler figures like the Wolver of Shetland carry this tension. The Wolver is not violent. He leaves fish for the poor. He harms no one, and yet he does not live among them. Kindness does not return him to the village. The boundary remains. The werewolf is not a monster that invades society. He is what remains when society withdraws. And this is where the fear deepens. Because Black Anis waits beyond the boundary, but the werewolf begins within it. These stories were not meant to suggest that nature itself was evil, only that it was powerful, and that power required respect, structure, and memory. Which is why, carved quietly into stone, often overlooked, there appears another figure, the Green Man. The Green Man does not stand outside the village, he is built into it. His face peers from church walls, roof bosses, arches, and thresholds. Leaves spill from his mouth, his eyes, his ears, not as decoration, but as interruption. He appears in places meant to impose order, morality, and permanence, and that is precisely why he is there. The Green Man is not a symbol of nature's kindness. He is a reminder that the wild was never meant to be fully removed. Where Black Anis represents nature abandoned, hostile and uncontained, and the werewolf represents humanity stripped of structure and absorbed by the wild, the Green Man represents a fragile balance that once existed between the two. He does not wait in the forest. He watches from the boundary itself. His presence says that growth and decay were once understood as shared processes, that humanity did not stand apart from the land, but within it, that suppressing the natural entirely does not make it disappear, it forces it outward. And when it is forced outward, it becomes something to fear. When it is denied too long, it returns distorted. The Green Man does not promise safety. He implies responsibility. Black Anis waits where nature is abandoned. The werewolf walks where humanity has been stripped away. And the Green Man remains where the two were once allowed to meet. Together, these figures do not contradict one another. They describe a system, a warning passed down through story rather than instruction, a recognition that boundaries were not just lines on the land, but agreements, maintained through attention, care, and shared life. When those agreements failed, the stories hardened, not into fantasy but into fear with purpose. And yet, the forest no longer presses against our doors. Wolves no longer wait at the hedge line. Hollow trees no longer swallow children whole. The land has been mapped, fenced, lit, and named, but the boundary has not disappeared. It has only moved. Isolation is no longer enforced by wilderness, but by absence. Absence of community, of shared ritual, of witness. People can live surrounded by others and still exist beyond the boundary, unseen and unaccounted for. Hunger is no longer only for food, but for connection. Exposure is no longer to weather, but to silence. Black Anis no longer waits in trees, but in moments where care fractures, when attention becomes intermittent, when responsibility is assumed rather than practiced. The wolf man no longer prowls the forest. He appears when people slip beyond structure through neglect, exclusion, or erosion rather than exile. He does not transform suddenly. He thins. He becomes less recognizable, first to others and then to himself. And the Green Man lingers as a memory, not of comfort, but of balance. A reminder that life was once lived with the understanding that suppression creates distortion and denial breeds fear. We no longer tell these stories as warnings. We call them folklore. But the fears they carry remain familiar. The fear of losing children, the fear of losing oneself, the fear that something essential can erode quietly, without spectacle, until it is gone. These stories ask difficult questions. What happens when community weakens? What happens when people live too long without recognition, accountability, or care? What happens when the world becomes something we pass through rather than participate in? The old stories understood that humanity was not automatic, it was maintained. And when it wasn't, the boundary thinned, not between worlds, but between people. These figures were never meant to comfort, they were meant to be remembered, because the land still holds its warnings, because boundaries still exist, even when we refuse to name them, because something essential still waits in the quiet spaces, not to harm, but to remind. And whether we recognize them or not, the old figures remain where they always have. Watching the edges, there are more signs written into the land, more warnings passed quietly through time. If you wish to hear them, subscribe to Whispered Folklore.